Hello and welcome to Tête-à-Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest this week is Rashid Khalidi. He is the Edward Said Professor Emeritus of Modern Arab Studies at Columbia University in New York. He's the author of several books, including The 100 Years' War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonialism and Resistance. It was published in 2020. It's now coming out in a French version with an afterword addressing the latest war in Gaza, and he joins us from New York City. Thank you very much for being our guest, Professor Khalidi.
Thank you for having me.
So in the book, you begin by citing a letter written by one of your ancestors to Theodor Herzl in 1899, in which your ancestors recognizes the right of Jews in Palestine, but also warns that there are already some people living there and that it would be pure madness to settle there. Is what's happening today and what has happened since proof that he was right?
I'm afraid my great uncle, Yusuf Khalidi, was correct. He understood the reasons for Zionism. He understood the degree of persecution to which Jews were and are subject. He understood anti-Semitism. He had taught in Vienna, which was a deeply anti-Semitic city at the time. But he said, as you said, there's a people here, and they will not be replaced. And he warned, I think, very presciently, of the fact that this would cause enormous suffering. And he said, for the sake of God, please leave Palestine alone. Unfortunately, I'm afraid he was right. He understood very deeply the degree to which the establishment of the Jewish state that Herzl was calling for would cause unending conflict.
Right. In the book, obviously, you describe both historically and also personally those years of struggle. I have to ask you, obviously, about the latest episode in Gaza. How is it different than the previous wars or the previous tensions?
I mean, if one looks carefully at the various stages that I talk about in the book, whether it's the implantation of the Zionist project with the support of Great Britain in the first 2 decades after World War I, whether it's the Nakba, in which 750,000 Palestinians were forced out of Palestine, or the events after the '67 war, when another 300,000 were forced out of Palestine. Or one goes right back to Herzl and his writings about spiriting the population across the borders. One sees that the basic objective was the creation in an overwhelmingly Arab country of a Jewish state at the expense of the indigenous population. And one sees in the statements of Israeli leaders today, senior ministers, a variety of leaders of Israel, the same desire to essentially replace the Palestinians with Israelis, replace Palestine with Israel. So in that sense, not very much has changed. The means have changed. The horror of the genocidal war on Gaza is obviously at a scale unimaginable previously. But the basics, the basic outline of this conflict, as I lay it out in this book, has not really changed. It has become obviously more horrific. What has been done to Gaza is beyond the scale of anything that was done previously.
You participated in the early 90s in some discussions that would eventually lead to the Oslo Accords. Clearly today, the two-state solution is now dead and buried, not only but by what's happening in Gaza after the October 7 attacks by Hamas, but also what's happening maybe beyond the radar in the West Bank.
I think that's correct. I was involved in the discussions in Madrid and in Washington, which did not lead to a fruitful result. We realized very early on that Palestinian statehood, self-determination, an end to the occupation, an end to colonization were simply not in the cards. That was not something that was on offer. All that was on offer was self-government, autonomy, under continued occupation. And so we were unsuccessful. Those negotiations ended in Washington in June 1993, and the PLO leadership decided to go to Oslo and do the deal that we know about, which was a deal that in effect allowed the continuation of occupation and colonization up until the present day. So what is happening in Gaza, what Israel attempted to do in Gaza, and what is currently happening in the West Bank is an attempt to continue the expulsion of the Palestinians and their replacement with Israelis, essentially. The settlers in the West Bank are completely uncontrollable. They are supported by the Israeli military and police. The laws are being changed. The West Bank is being annexed as we speak. And all of this is continuation of the same ideas that Herzl expressed in his writings and especially in his private diaries. And that is the intention of Zionist leaders from the very beginning, the replacement of an overwhelmingly Arab population of Palestine back in 1917 or right up to World War II and the Nakba with a Jewish population.
So this means that as more states have recognized Palestine as a state, there is no two-state solution. It can only be a one-state solution, either one dominated by Israel, like you seem to think, or maybe a binational state, which is what some Palestinians have been advocating.
I mean, I argue in this book that the only kind of sustainable solution that's possible is one on the basis of complete equality. You cannot say this national group has rights and this national group doesn't have rights. I argue in the book that this is a settler colonial process, but I don't deny that there's a national aspect to it. There is now an Israeli people, as there is an American people. At the end of a settler colonial process in North America and Australia, there are now peoples. But those are processes that led to the overwhelming and subjugation of the indigenous population. And that is what Israel has, in fact, been doing ever since the beginning, expelling and subjugating. You cannot have a solution on that basis. That any solution has to give all residents of Palestine, Jews, Muslims, Christians, equal rights. You cannot have an ethno-state based on the superiority of one group, which claims absolute rights. And this is not just a claim. This is, since 2018, this is the position of the Israeli government as laid out in the Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people law, which says that only the Jewish people have the right of self-determination in Israel. And Israel now controls the entirety of the territory between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. So that cannot be a basis for any kind of sustainable, just solution. There has to be equality. How it's organized, confederation, federation, one state, binational state, is not really the most important thing. The most important thing is absolute equality, which you do not have now. You have the absolute supremacy of one group throughout Palestine.
What
from
about
the river to the sea. Sorry, from the river to the sea. That is what you have today.
What about the Palestinian leadership? Obviously, the Palestinian Authority is in shambles. Hamas took that decision on October 7 that led probably to the devastation of Gaza and of Hamas. What do you make of the Palestinian leadership in retrospect?
I mean, this is something I've written about, not just in this book, but in an earlier book. The Palestinians have had very bad luck with their leadership. There were a few periods of success. I talk about that in this book and in earlier books. But they have also suffered terribly from bad leadership and from a lack of unity. Today, the Palestinian national movement is in a very bad state. It's not unified. There's not a clear strategic vision. Neither of the two groups, nor the Fatah leadership in the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, nor the Hamas leadership in Gaza and elsewhere in Palestine, has a clear strategic objective, and they certainly don't have a unified strategic objective. There's no way that this situation can last, and it is extremely harmful for the Palestinians, obviously. A lack of unity, a lack of a clear strategic vision. There have been periods in the past when the Palestinians have been unified and when they have had some kind of a strategic vision. Unfortunately, that's not the situation today. They are unfortunately very badly led. And public opinion reflects that. I think most people are very critical of all leaderships in Palestine at the moment.
Speaking of public opinion, quickly, because we don't have much time left, do you think there is a shift in Western public opinion vis-a-vis Israel, even American perception of Israel? And I would even go as far as to say even American Jewish perception of Israel.
Unquestionably, there has been a seismic, fundamental shift in public opinion in the United States. This is particularly pronounced among young people, but it's true among all age groups. It's noticeable on the left, on the right, in the center. Every opinion poll over the last year and a half, 2 years, has shown a major, apparently lasting shift away from blind support for Israel and towards a greater sympathy for the Palestinians and a much greater degree of criticism for the blind, unthinking support of the United States for absolutely almost anything Israel does. That shift is occurring between generations in the Jewish community and in many other groups in the United States, where young people have seen the reality on social media, on alternative media, and they know that all of the things that they were told are lies. They know that what Israeli military spokesmen, US government spokesmen are saying has no relation to the truth. They have seen genocide live streamed. And that has fundamentally changed public opinion all over the West. It hasn't changed governments, unfortunately, especially in the United States. It hasn't changed the media giants, which continue to pump out lies and deceptions and fables. But it has changed public opinion in a remarkable way, with a rapidity that frankly has astonished me. I was born in New York City. I've lived in the United States more than half my life. I have never seen a shift as rapid or as thorough as the one that has happened with American public opinion across the political spectrum.
Rashid Khalidi, I want to thank you very much for being our guest here on Tête à Tête, and thank you all for watching this show on France 24.